Okay, good morning. Welcome to Ordinance and Policy Committee. It's January 24th, 2024. Present today, Public Works Director Troy Kruger, City Finance Officer Chandra Phillips, and City Attorney Paul Jensen. Also joining us today are Code Enforcement Officers Chelsea Luce and Dan Furness, and Public Safety Commissioner Justin Day. Council present today, Councilman Schramm and Councilman Clunt, plus our guest for today. Today's agenda is going to be maybe two items, for sure one. City of Winter will address proposed ordinance 1071 for first reading passage and approval, and then possibly ordinance 1072, economic development incentives for the City of Winter, two alternative versions. At this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to City Attorney Paul Jensen to navigate us through today's waters. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had asked the folks that were appearing here this morning to discuss this with council if they had needed another copy of our ordinance that was under consideration. I was assured they all had their copy. I know that we've all had an opportunity to look at the ordinance, and it was under consideration at the time we pulled it, tabled it, and brought it back here to committee. So what I would like to do is to start with you folks that are here proposing your, and I don't even know if it's a single proposal or a comprehensive set of ideas or whatever, but I would like to start out by having you present to us exactly what proposal you want us to consider, what portion of the proposed ordinance you dispute or would like to change. And I should start by clarifying one thing, because I know Dr. Laura, you had, when you presented to council, you had talked about wanting to see the city include a limit of 3 cats per household. I just need to make clear that everybody understands the courts have long ago ruled that such a rule is unconstitutional. We can't just put a blanket number of 3 or something like that on a household and say you can't have more than that, because the courts say that's unconstitutional. You have to, in every case, consider a lot of other factors in determining how much and how many. Under the real simple concept that some people probably can't take care of 1, some people can adequately take care of 50. So the courts say you can't just say a number, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to make that clear so you understand that from my perspective and how I have advised City Council, that's one of our starting places. So from there, I'll open it up to whoever wants to begin the spokes. I would like to, at least initially, to make sure that there's time for questions, discussion, et cetera, especially from our 2 council people. I'd like to have at least a starting limit on how much time we're beginning with. So if somebody could plan to maybe spend between 5 and 10 minutes presenting, and be subject to letting us ask some questions, and then from there we'll see where we go. I just didn't want to land it into a 45-minute discussion of one issue and have 14 other issues we never talk about. So that's kind of where I would like to go. If whoever wants to start.
I guess I'm gonna try to just do these in kind of points.
Dr. Laura, if you'd like to go to the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I can hear you, but I think the public would like to hear you too.
Right.
So in regards to your proposed ordinance that you guys, the 90.40 cats at large, There's a few things. Your ordinance, as it stands, we don't have a problem with a few changes. Okay, so we would like to reduce the held time for cats from 7 days to 2 to 3, for a reason that we do not believe that you guys can adequately care for a stray cat in the current conditions you have for 7 days, and we think that creates a welfare issue. So as your ordinance stands, that's basically the only change we want to see to that ordinance. Now, what we would like is to have some additions to the ordinance. So I understand constitutionally you're saying there's a 3-cat limit is unconstitutional. In the state of South Dakota, I think pets, cats, dogs are considered property. They're not considered a pet. They're not in a separate group. And I would think, is there an ordinance for how many, beat up old pieces of crap cars you can have on your land? Or because to me that's property, it's no difference. Because there are plenty of city councils in the state of South Dakota that have a limit on pets because they are property, they're not considered. It's in some countries and other locales, they have pets are in a separate category. In the state of South Dakota, they're not, which is part of the reason why animal welfare laws are so hard to enforce in this state, is because animals are considered property, not a living, breathing animal. So I challenge that a little bit. I think that's maybe something that, if pushed, you would actually constitutionally be able to enforce, because they are considered property, not.
I'll provide you with plenty of information to justify my position.
Okay. So the things we would like to kind of have beef up this ordinance is, I know there is, from complaints, people are saying that a cat is coming into their yard and pooping in their garden or on their lawn and digging up their flowers. These cats aren't owned, they're fed, and they're not the same thing. And your ordinance, sadly, is not going to address that, because fed cats don't go in traps. They don't. And owned cats don't go in traps. So the cats you're going to catch are feral cats who aren't fed or owned. So if we want to catch these cats that are the problem, which are fed cats, they're fed by members of the public who we could easily provide you a list of who they are, literally their addresses, because we've tried to work with these people and they are obstructionists to helping solve this issue. They need to be told that they cannot feed cats, or if they are going to feed cats, the homeowner, the business owner, is responsible for trapping those cats themselves and getting them to a spay and neuter program, okay? So that's not going to cost them anything other than time, as in, there are traps. The city has traps, the coalition has traps, the clinic has traps. The traps are free. Then all they have to do is literally get them to the clinic, which is somewhere where I think maybe the police department or city workers could facilitate that, as in picking up the cats in the back of a pickup, bringing them to the clinic. When they're spayed and neutered, their ear is then tipped so that they're visually, you can tell from a distance if that cat has been altered, and then they get their cats back to feed them on their porch, which sadly, that means they're still going to shit in your yards, okay? So it's not a solution to that problem, but the ordinance that you guys are proposing is not a solution to that problem either. It looks good on paper, I get it. You're satisfying people who are complaining, because someone complains and then you go put a trap in their yard and you don't catch cat at all, or you catch cat that's not the offender, and we spay and neuter it and it gets rehomed, or they re-release it on the street and the cat is still shitting and pissing in their yard. So the only way I believe you are going to get these fed cat people on board, because as I've said, feeding cats and hoarding animals is a mental illness. It is. It's been proven as a mental illness. These people need help that is beyond probably what the city can offer, but we can control the actual cat population problem by starting to impose fines on them. If they're going to feed the cats, they need to be having them altered. If their next door neighbour is saying, that fed cat with the tipped ear came into my yard and pooped, they need to remove that cat, and we need to put the onus back on these people that are feeding the cats. So there isn't endless places to rehome these cats to. There's not. We've tried. There aren't. Like these ranchers that will take them, they're going to take them for a hot minute and then they have enough cats and those cats breed, especially if you're taking them unspayed and neutered. And they're like, no, I've got enough cats, I don't need it. And it takes a cold snap like the one we've just had or a distemper to go through them. And then suddenly they're like, yeah, I could take 4 or 5 cats again. And that's going to be cyclical, okay? So there isn't an endless population of ranches to take them to. A cat will travel 50 miles to return to its colony. So you've got to find ranches 50 miles from where they originated from, at least. This is like, it's not a simple like, oh, we trapped some cats, no one claimed them, we took them out to such and such's ranch 20 miles out of town and now they're not our problem. Because then those cats breed out there and they end up on Facebook Marketplace and there's literally in the last month been endless ads for come get your kittens from the ranch. And those cats end up in winter because these cat hoarders bring them back to winter. And then we keep the cycle going. So if you want to rehome these cats, they need to be spayed and neutered. If you want to catch these cats, you need to stop these people from feeding them. And the only way you're going to do that is substantial fines. And I'm not talking, oh, Mrs. Smith, you fed the cats, it's $50. I'm saying, Mrs. Smith, you fed the cats, it's $300. And if they're not working with you, like if you find people who are like, okay, I know I'm feeding the cats, I'll trap them. I will, as the homeowner that's feeding these cats, I'll trap them, get them spayed and neutered. They can be seen to be spayed and neutered, and as the population keeps, because cats attract cats, right? So if you've got 20 spayed and neutered cats eating on someone's porch, another cat gets dumped in town or someone else isn't spaying, neutering their pets and kittens get out on the street, they're going to end up at Mrs. Smith's house. Okay, so it's a never-ending thing. If they're feeding those cats, they're going to be constantly trapping and spaying and neutering cats. And you're still going to have neighbours complaining because they're still going to be in the neighbour's yard. So ultimately, if we spay and neuter these, we can reduce the population over time. And this is the only program it works. It is used in Sturgis, it's used in Rapid City, it's used in Sioux Falls, it's used in Spearfish. I don't know if any of you have been to those towns, but you don't see feral cats running around on Main Street. You don't. In winter, you do. They're everywhere. So this is the only program that works, is spay, neuter, remove if you can. Removing them from these homes is going to be problematic because you are going to get pushback. Because as you said, they'll say, well, I'm looking after them. They're not. These cats aren't vaccinated. These cats aren't spayed and neutered. They're not provided medical care when they need it. They're not provided, when it's... This cold snap we had killed God knows how many of those cats because they're not provided shelter. They're not provided water and food when they actually need it, as in extreme weather conditions. So if you're saying the Constitution doesn't allow you to say that's too many cats, you're not doing a good job looking after them, that kind of puts you in a position where how do you remove this population? Because what you're creating this ordinance for is because you have had complaints about people having cats poop and pee in yards and dig up flowers and destroy stuff. Your ordinance is not going to fix that. It's not going to. There's no long-term... It looks good. You go to someone's yard and put out a trap, don't catch anything, catch the wrong cat. But you've got to do something else to stop these people who are festering this problem from doing it. And if you can't do it by saying, look, you can only have 3 cats, you have to put the onus on them to say you have to make sure these cats are spayed and neutered, and if they continue going into someone else's yard, and we know, and everyone's got a phone, people can take a picture of it. Cats are pretty individual looking. If it's the one with the white slash on its face and it's a black cat, okay, guess what? That cat's going. It's not, you can't control it. You either put it in your house or it goes out of town. But until we start spaying and neutering them, you're not getting anywhere. You're just continuing spinning a wheel. The Spay and Neuter Coalition, I understand that the city has had its budget for 2024, and we are understanding of that. But between the West River Spay and Neuter Coalition, donations from the public, those two things alone last year spent $25,973 on spaying and neutering cats. The animal clinic at least matched that.
Was that in just?
That was just winter. That animal clinic at least matched that because we decrease the cost of our spay and neuters. We do them at less than half price when they're part of this coalition. So altogether, there's been almost $52,000 at least spent in the last 12 months on spaying and neutering cats in this area. Now, I don't expect the city to foot that bill. I don't expect them to come in right now and pay anything, but what I would like is the city to start looking at in 2025, matching what the Spay and Neuter Coalition do, which is $1,000 a month, which is basically, it works out to about 10 to 11 cats a month. And they roll it over because some months we can trap a lot, some we can't. You know, I might trap a heap of cats one month and then none the next. So we would like you guys to look at matching that because the Spay and Neuter Coalition have tried to pull funding from us before because it's not their job, and we've begged and borrowed to get them to keep it. So at some point they're going to pull funding from us and it's going to come down to donations, and that's not going to work.
That $50-some thousand, you say in this area, are you talking Gregory Clome, Winter?
No, winter, like downtown winter.
Only Winter.
Only winter. Yep, we haven't taken cats from anywhere else. So they've been trapped within the city of Winter. So that's something we would like I said, that for 2024, we've got the Spay and Neuter Coalition on board. We continue doing what we're doing, but we would like some support in 2025 because at some point the Spay and Neuter Coalition are going to step away, and they've asked us to get the city to step up so that they can, because they have other areas that are closer to them that they would be wanting to fund. So that's kind of the dot points on what we would like. There are issues with trapping cats as well. It's not as simple as putting a trap out and just coming back 6 hours later or 12 hours later or 24 hours later and seeing if there's a cat in it. For a few reasons, whether here, summer or winter, you can't have a cat exposed to the elements in a trap for that long. They will freeze to death or they will overheat and die. The other thing is when we've been trapping them in these areas where there's fed cats, the residents near that are feeding the cats, go let them out of the trap. So you basically have to have someone sitting there and watching it, which is why this isn't, your ordinance as it stands is really not going to help the problem, because if you go put a trap out and an officer comes by and 6 hours later, if there was a cat in there, someone let it out already, or it's been sitting in there being exposed to the elements, which is not okay. So what I'm saying is if you put the onus back on the people that are feeding these cats, and like I said, we can provide you a list of all these addresses. We've tried to work with these people. You can literally go knock on their door and say, you have 7 days to start trapping cats. Because if they stop feeding them and put the feed in the trap, trust me, they'll catch those cats. And then they'll have them at least spayed and neutered and tipped, and then if they're in someone's yard later on with a tipped ear, guess what? You can't control that cat. It's a public nuisance. It's got to be rehomed. And at least you have grounds to do that then. Because if it's constitutionally okay to own these many cats, they apparently can fight you on that. But like I said, when you go to these people, they don't own them. If you put the pressure on them, they go, oh, they're not my cats. I just feed them. So then you go, well, okay, let me trap them so I can get them a good home. Well, no, I love those cats. So this is a huge mental health, public health issue. It's not as simple as some cats pooped in someone's flower bed.
Do you mind if I add to that? And I can keep it short, but I think there's a couple things to just add. So when we talk a bulleted approach, just kind of keep it real fast. Like if you guys keep the ordinance the way that you have it right now,
If you would just take it down to 2 days, then you could leave them in the trap, and that's fairly humane because they'll be sedated for half of that anyways, because they were hopefully taking them to the clinic to get them fixed. That's a lot more, I mean, feasible when you think of like, if you're not gonna feed them, not putting your hands in the cage and whatnot. And then if you release them back, then at least that's, you know, you're not, in any issues with like, you know, animal cruelty or whatever, and then you probably won't have any issues with, officers touching the traps, holding them by the, you know, the handle and not obviously having a hand in there. The other thing is, when you are holding them, where are you holding them? Is the facility set up for that? So I did just want to circle back on that. I think that's something you guys should think about. I don't know if it would be feasible to hold them at the animal clinic, give them a stipend. That I haven't talked to her about that, but you guys should think about that. The current facility is not set up for that, so I do want to circle back to that. Mainly when it comes to like feeding and fixing, you know, if you do issue a fine and you think about the fine more broadly, this isn't a $50 water heater or water meter. That's a one house situation, right? This is a whole community, so I think beefing up that fine will definitely change things, and then you could use that towards some of this program in the current fiscal year. With that being said, we did talk about how we would prefer that you guys match the amount that's being donated, but I would really prefer you budget in to cover that amount, because we can't guarantee that Spearfish is going to keep, or Deadwood is going to keep covering this. It is entirely effective if we can get the city to actually do it. So I personally run the program. I set it up. I am the one that has been fixing. I fixed 99 in 3 months by myself. That is a lot. That's a lot for one person. And so eventually I got pretty ticked off that nobody was volunteering when I went and put the legwork in for this program. In addition to that, I have personally adopted out, like not to farms, 100 plus cats. I can send you the exact numbers because I track that on a regular. I don't have that number with me, but I know it's over 100. That is adopted to indoor homes. So I've taken that many off of the streets. The funds that she mentioned, so the around 52,000 that has been donated, does not include the funds that I have personally put in, which would be around, I mean, that's at least 5,000. And I can again give you stuff for that too. But I just want to say, like, this isn't just a one person thing. The volunteers that I have had, I don't have anybody that's a true volunteer outside of one lady that helps with me. So I think when it comes down to like what is most important and what is going to be the most effective, if you just focus on a couple of bullet points, tapering down your ordinance to 2 days would be ideal. I understand if you have to do 3 days, but then that opens it up for like, should they sit there for 3 days without food or water? That's a question that you'll have to figure out for animal cruelty and neglect. Then on top of that, requiring, like, we can give you a list. So if it requires a complaint to then make the neighborhood feeder fix them, I mean, I can give you names and that will be my complaint. I have names that I have approached about fixing the cats, and they have said, sorry, nope, we don't want you touching those. So that's pretty irritating, right? You don't want something crapping on your lawn. Well, then you have to make the people that are fixing them and bringing them to your area fix them. I can tell you that personally, I started in my neighborhood for fixing because I don't have all the time in the world. I do work a lot of hours. And I was drawing them into traps. Justin knows this because he's my neighbor. So I was drawing them into traps, and we had probably 30 plus in our neighborhood, and they're slowly dwindling down. Even if you do put food in that area after they've been fixed, they tend to go elsewhere because now they're not drawn to each other. So the problem when they're unfixed is that they're all, connecting together because they're all in heat and they're all mating. So if you can get them fixed, they generally tend to move out, and then you won't have the problem of something in your yard all the time. The other thing about that is just, if you look long-term, and I'm talking like for the immediate, making them fix them, finding them if they're not, you can work closely with me. I will know because I issue the vouchers, so it is a systematic approach that's provable, right? Then that money, like I said, you're spending it back into the program this year potentially. That would be helpful. I also think that if you think long-term, like outside of this, and I'm just putting this on your guys' plate now to kind of digest and think about long-term, if you did a tiered approach for the fees that you potentially allocate to this program, you could start it here and level it down year to year, right? Because you shouldn't be needing that many once you figure out the program and you're starting to dwindle those numbers. So it's this much now. Over the years, it should be tapering down. And then maybe you're just leaving like X amount. What else I was going to say is that if you think about long-term, like a lot of the people that are feeding, and I don't mean this in any offense, it's just a fact, a lot of people, not all, are lower income people that are feeding these animals, so they don't have the money to then go out and fix. I personally cannot say that I will cover everybody that comes to me and say, hey, we're gonna fix these. It's not happening. I don't have the money. I'm not personally gonna give you my whole paycheck for this. But I will say, like, if we have the budget to help cover these these spay and neuters, which we have raised, you know, we're at 52,000. That's where we have the allocated amount, and I've been encouraging people to use those vouchers when they're available, but they're not doing that. So we are able to roll over those funds month to month. Now, if people are if they're feeding the cats and they're not fixing them, and we don't have the budget, I do believe you should still be fined for that, and you have to find a way to get them fixed. Or you stop feeding them, right? So that person, if they don't have the funds and I don't have the funds, they're going to be forced to stop feeding them, because otherwise you're getting a fine. So I'm not gonna own, you know, that I will raise X number of funds no matter how many people come to me. And we do have a stipulation, they have to be stray and feral. They cannot be owned cats. So the last thing I will end on, long-term, you know, I don't know what you guys do with this, but when it comes to low income, like, I know you do vouchers for low income things, costs of, you know, whether it be schooling or whatever, you could do a low income voucher for spay and neuters to distribute to the public on the same list that you're already using for some of that. And that would help too. Then at least it puts it back on them to get them fixed. But hopefully that helps. I think your ordinance is headed in the right direction, but you do need to make sure that you're putting them in a safe location, as well as tapering it down to the 2 days preferably. And then I think if you tack on fines for fixing, that would be the most immediate. You will see a dwindled population then. So hopefully that helps.
Questions, council?
I don't think so.
This time.
I have a couple of questions, just for clarification for the notes.
Sure.
So, and I think Felicia just covered it. Ultimately, if the only time the business pays for it is if they are feral. You do
Yeah.
not pay for it if they're
Stray,
a pet.
unowned.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, do you at that time through the clinic keep a list of who brought them in? So that if they see that they're tipped in their yard, they can call and say, this is the cat that's here, who brought them in?
So we can't, unless we were to microchip these cats, which is about, excuse me, about $50 to do, and that's a once in a lifetime thing. There is no way for us to identify that cat. Like, we could take pictures of them, but honestly, like, if we're doing 400 or 500 cats, looking through a library of pictures to ID them is just a waste of someone's time. So yes, we could microchip them, and then they're identifiable for life. And that would be a really easy way to do it, but that's another $50. And that is something that it is $50 because we do not mark that up at the clinic because we want pets to be microchipped. So it's literally would be a $50 charge. The city has a microchip scanner that we gave to the city, the clinic did. So the city has something like that. I don't know if it was, I know pets have been showing up at the clinic again, officers have been bringing them. And I don't know why that is for us to scan them, because that's why we gave you the microchip scanner, is so that you didn't have to bring them to us. So that's something that if it's not working or there's an issue, we can do that, but we don't. That's the whole reason I literally gave you one. So it was so that they didn't come. It reads it, and you go onto a computer, put in the number, and it literally brings up the owner's details. It's not absolutely 100% foolproof. If the person moves or changes their cell phone number or email and doesn't update their account, it's a dead end. But they're told when we microchip them that if you move, if you change your phone number, they got to log in. So,
How that works.
yeah.
They do that when they move out of homes.
Yes, yep. So it's just one of those deals that's not 100%, but that would be the only way we could identify it. We do keep track of who brings them, so like and where they were kind of trapped. But as far as like that cat was trapped on this date in this area, no. That would require
You can't visibly
microchipping.
see the ear tip, so like if you had a cat on your lawn, if it's an owned cat, then you wouldn't see it, or if it's not been fixed, there would be no tip. But for the ones that they're doing, they're cutting a little, like a little V out of the ear, so you can look at it, and if it's got that out of it, it's pretty visible.
You only do that for the feral cat?
Feral cats, yeah, we don't do that for owned people's
Or
cats.
for stray, like if they're stray and roaming, a lot of the times if they are friendly, we are putting them with a foster personally, and so I do try my best to allocate resources for that, so that we're not putting them back out on the streets, and that helps a lot to diminish the population as well.
The other final thing that I have is, we are required by the state that we have to collect certain information for any donations.
Mhm.
So I can get you that list after the fact. I mean, you have to be considered a nonprofit by the state, so you have to be certified nonprofit, and then you have to give us your budgets, your bank flows, all of that. So all of that would be required. And then, as far as if we were to beef up the fine and take it in this year, it's not quite how municipalities work, but we can figure something out with that, but, right.
Any other speakers?
I wrote up my notes because I'm not a very good public speaker. I have a tendency to, you can tell, my voice cracks. So, first off, I want to thank Felicia and Animal Clinic. They are doing an amazing job with the TNR program. It is the best program for taking care of the stray and feral cats. My issue with their proposal is not for the hoarders of the cats, not the people that don't want to get them TNR. The cats that are in our yard, we did this program. It needs to be done to reduce. My concern is for the animals that cannot be rehomed, that have been feral for 11 years or so, that you can't even get close to. If you've looked at the handouts I gave you, they are from national and international TNR programs. Alley Cat International and ASPCA say that the humane thing to do with these animals that cannot be home is to have a caregiver that supplies food, water, and shelter. I say that the people that are caregivers, these are animals. They are living beings. If the caregiver is going to do this, they need to do it for the life of the cat. Just like if you had any animal, you take care of it for life. If they are fed, they have less problems with getting into garbages, in that aspect. They do stay in the area, even if they're fed. If you read how much they say that you're supposed to feed a cat, they're still going to hunt. And they are going to kill their animal, the things that they hunt. On the microchipping that she proposes, that is an amazing way to track animals. But like she said, it's not foolproof in the fact that if people don't change their addresses. Also, from the research I did, not all scanners can read all microchips. They are working on trying to make it so that all these companies that make them have the same type of thing. But as of right now, case in point, my daughter lived in Joplin, Missouri. She had both of her dogs microchipped. When she moved back to Sioux Falls, the vet that she went to could not read the microchips. So the dogs had to be re-microchipped. As for cats being microchipped, CBS Evening News did a report on I can't remember, I'm sorry, and I probably shouldn't bring it up because I don't remember exact. But there is a percentage chance that with the cats being so small, and they put it in between their shoulder blades, that If it moves, it will paralyze the cat. And they do have in cats, that small animal, they have a tendency to move. And again, $45 for me with 3 cats in my home, I can't afford that. A $300 fine, I couldn't afford that. And in her thing, she wanted to license them. I read every animal ordinance that is on the books. And there isn't even an ordinance anymore for having a dog licensed. They did 10 years ago because I licensed my dog. But yeah, so I mean, if you are going to make that, you've got to go back and you've got to add it to the dog. What about bunnies? You know, a lot of people in town have pet bunnies. Chickens. Are these animals going to have to microchip because they get loose? Are you going to have a fine for them? A $300 fine for feeding them if they get loose? And you can't prove that it's yours? I'm sorry. I do. I get very emotional. But I thank you for your time.
Dr. Tobin, are you speaking on behalf today?
No.
Lisa, are you?
No, I just wanted, I have an issue with somebody that doesn't even live in the house across the street that has a ton of cats. And they're fed regularly and nobody lives there. They're destroying my yard.
Do you care, would you like to share that experience to council so they can hear that in the public?
Okay, well, I'm not a cat hater. I like cats, but I have a neighbor that moved away about 9 months ago, and she has a guy that comes up from Nebraska that feeds her cats every couple of weeks, and they live in the garage, and they wreak havoc in my yard. I have trouble growing flowers in my flower bed because of them. I have a place where we removed a tree, and I've been trying to grow grass for 2 years because I'll plant grass and they're over there digging and pissing and shitting, as to quote Laura. And it's just a mess. And they're at my house all the time. And she doesn't even live there. And I don't even know how many are over there. They just leave the garage door open and the door on the side, and they're just all over all the time. And they like my yard best. I don't know why, but they like my yard the best. And it's just frustrating because I've had to spend money to put things like plastic netting on the yard so that they don't dig stuff up. And it's frustrating. I just want you to know, there's more than just a couple of homeowners. There's a lot of homeowners that are mad about it. And nothing ever gets done. And I just want, like, her in particular to be held accountable. I went over and talked to the guy that comes and feeds them, and he said he would pass that along to her, but nothing changes. And it's been going on for a long time. So.
Questions, Councilor?
Just like I stated before, I think a property owner has the right to not have, whether it's somebody's own cat or not, on their property. And I think that's our main thing we have to address.
And I don't know how we do that. I mean, I've been struggling with this ever since it first came up. Britt Kuchera told me 3 or 4 years ago, he was catching cats and he was hauling them over to Gregory, and if I understood this correctly, just letting them loose. And then he said, really sorry I did that, because then his house had mice. And so, okay, got that on my mind. My next door neighbor to me fed those, they weren't, I don't think they were her cats, but she fed them every day. And now she's in an assisted living, and guess what? I don't have any more cats in my yard. Okay? So we try to be good neighbors, and we expect everybody else to be good neighbors, and yet we have no way to protect this person from this person's cats. And even if they're not this person's cats, if they're feeding them, they're aiding and abetting the destruction that's happening to the person who doesn't want the destruction to happen on their property. They have a right to that. And as a city, it's our responsibility to see to it that damage doesn't occur in any way, shape, or form to my property by somebody else. Now, whether that is ownership of a cat, or whether it's aiding and abetting a cat to be able to be there, somebody needs to be responsible for the damage taking place on my property. And that's where, as I understand this ordinance, we don't have to keep these cats 7 days, up to, okay? If we catch 3 cats and the police officer or whoever it is that's going to be making the phone calls to these farmers that want them, we can get rid of them tomorrow, if we so desire. If people own the cat and want to come and claim it, you would think that they would know the very same day it didn't show up for supper that maybe it's been caught, and they would start looking into it. But I just think that the cat owner needs to take responsibility for their own cat, and the people that are, as I understand, feeding these wild cats, if you will, they need to take responsibility for what they are aiding these cats to do to the people's property who don't want them in there. And that's the struggle. I say in jest a lot, well, take your 22 and take care of the problem. That is not the answer to the question. But we need to do something to stop these cats from going. And it's a great idea probably to spade and neuter them, but that's not going to stop them from defecating in my yard. It's not going to stop them from tearing up my plants. Now, I may have learned something today, that if we spay and neuter these cats, they'll quit having a desire to be together. Is that, and how long does that take? Is that a year's thing, or is that 3 months?
So female cats are induced ovulators, which means they stay in heat until they are bred. They don't, like most mammals, come into heat on a cat is in heat until it is bred. So you can see a drastic change, especially removing a lot of males are easy, right? But females, if you start reducing the female population, they stop, they're not in heat, males stop congregating because there's no females to breed, and they will move away because they want to find something to breed. And if the hormonal drive, within 3 to 6 months, you're going to see a massive change, because that's how often a cat can breed, is every 3 to 5 months. So within 3 months, you're going to start to see a difference if we start spaying and neutering them. So, and that's why cats breed so fast, is because they are induced ovulators. They're not like a dog, not like a human, not like a cow. They are in heat until they are pregnant, year round.
Yeah, that's gonna be your quickest and most effective way, because even if you kill them and then, say you euthanize everything in town, I'm just, just say that's what you did. You're going to find they come back, because people will be bringing them back from ranches, people will be collecting them again, and you're just gonna circle back with this same issue in like 2 to 3 years. The other thing is with the mice, it is nice to have some cats around town because there are rats and mice. I know when I moved here, I saw some of that too. And it's like, you want a healthy population, but you don't want so many. So I do think that this will solve your problem. You would probably notice a pretty drastic difference within 3 months. I had gotten a lot of compliments, and I was like, how are you guys? I don't know if you were one of them, or somebody had said like, hey, I don't even see any cats on our neighborhood anymore, and I'm like, really? And I know I run the program, so I see them everywhere. I think it's just something that I notice a lot. But I have been getting lots of compliments on like, hey, seems to drastically have been reduced, and Main Street was a big area that I hit right away. Unfortunately, there are so many people down there that feed them and don't fix them, and we're not willing to help with the program and or stop me from trapping on their areas, that I couldn't do anything about that. So I found it really helpful. I personally don't like cats in my yard, but at this point I've also just used my area to trap them, so I'm like, it is what it is. But it would be nice if you can get people to commit to that. You will not have the person calling you. The other thing to just think about is how many people are you gonna have complaining that you've moved their cat? You don't wanna have those calls either, because that's not fun either. I've had those where I've taken a couple cats from the area and tried to home them, and then I have to go back and get them, because that person's really ticked.
They go back to their, where they were?
Yes.
Yep.
So and I will say, one of them sits in this room right here. So.
A
you know
cat
what I
is
mean?
rehomed to the other end of the
To Sioux
state.
Falls. I took the cat to Sioux Falls, and it was actually gonna be an indoor cat, and I was asked to bring it back.
To live on the streets of Woonga
Yes.
and be fed. So that's what, this is a colossal problem, it's not. No.
So it is an you just gotta educate people, and I will continue to do that. I plan to roll out more of that as we go. That's on me, to educate people how you can, make this effective, but hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, just come to us, we're available whenever.
I got a few comments in here because I actually have the public call in and have some questions. So the fostering cat program, I've got several phone calls on this. How many cats are they allowed to foster at one
So
time?
we don't have a fostering program, we're just doing it voluntarily as we go. The TNR is only trap, neuter, release.
There's a couple of households in town, and they're saying that they're fostering cats until they can be placed.
They'll say that.
Yeah.
They'll say a lot of things.
So
We have one.
There's two residents that I know of that the neighbors have called and complained, and these people that have the animals claim that they're fostering these cats until they can be placed in
It's
homes.
not true.
So that is one issue that.
If they're fostered, they're not outside. So that would be my
No,
first
they are letting
indication.
them out, they're allowing them to go outside.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If they're a foster that we've placed, the cat is not outside.
So our ordinance would address that if we only allow 3 cats. So I think that's something to take note of. The other thing that I think it's state law. This was just brought up to me the other day, but if you trap an animal on a property and then you release it on another property, that's actually against South Dakota state law.
It is.
So
Mhm.
we would have to
We'd have to.
We'd have to address that, because you can't go down on Main Street and trap a cat and then take it to someplace else in town and release it, because that's against South Dakota
Yep.
state law, so.
So that's why we want to return them. It's trap, neuter, release, return. You just take it back. So like when we take them in, we label them so that we know exactly where it came from. We just let it right back out where we found it. And that's the most useful. If it's a kitten and it's if there are things that are like tame, we try to home them. Typically, we're working with those homeowners that we're trapping on to say like, hey, you've been feeding this, can we home it? I think we did try to do that with a few of the ones that she's
Oh,
been
yeah.
feeding and
You
whatnot,
took
so.
what?
I know the Sioux Falls area, they've been trying to implement this program, they're really struggling with it because they've had that law right there is what they're struggling with. Number 3, I just wanted to inform council that our shelter for animals, we have made plans to improve it. It's not really adequate. It's bare minimal for what we're doing, and we do have the resources to improve that facility and do what we have to do with it. So, just so you guys are aware that that's not an issue. We do have the resources to improve that facility, and we plan on doing some upgrades in there anyways.
Our current pound, it's not much, but it's, even if they're in the cage for 48 hours with a heat lamp or something, it's still better than living in an alley.
We've got our regulars down there that
Maybe.
show up about once a month.
Well, they got heat.
Yeah, it's more the.
Heat's better than cold.
The stress that
It's
you
the
put
stress.
that animal under. So for example, dogs and cats can't be kept together. So you can't have a dog next to a cat. That's not okay. And what we're trying to say is like, these cats that are coming in, like I said, they're not owned, they're not friendly, they're not gonna like, and when they're in the trap, they're really not friendly. When they come to the animal clinic, we're not touching them with anything other than a needle through the bottom of the cage. We're not reaching in there until they're unconscious, and then we put them back in the cage while they're unconscious. So if you've got officers reaching into a kennel to remove it, to put it in another cage, or put it back in the trap, transporting it in and out of something, they're gonna get bit. And rabies is the least of your problems. Rabies, I can cut the head off that cat and find out if it had rabies. Your officer's gonna be okay. A tendonitis or a cat bite injury is a career-ending injury. And I'm talking like career-ending. You can't use your hand for anything. So that's a huge liability issue for the city. That's one reason why vet carers is expensive, is because the liability I have to have just on my staff for something like that is colossally huge. So that would be something else that you'd have to look at. So having a way where officers aren't having to reach in and out of cages, move cats from one thing to another, put food in and out, put litter boxes in and out, because these cats are not friendly. You're not going to catch Mrs. Smith's prized Persian. You're catching alley cats. And they're not friendly, especially when trapped. They're not like suddenly nice to you.
They're mean.
So, and they're good at it. They're an arsenal. There's a reason cats kill so many things. They've got 4 paws and a mouth, and it's pretty good. They're way worse than dogs. So that's something that I think, well, reducing it to 2 days would limit that, but then you can't keep them with dogs. So if your facility is side by side with a dog that's barking, that's like we talk about things being welfare and ethical, that you get slammed for that, like you just will. That's not okay. So that's,
setting up a shelter for them.
that'd be a long
I
term.
mean, long-term, I think you guys should look at a humane society just based on
Well,
what I
that's
see for you
good.
all, but I don't know what that looks like. It sounds like you have a grant writer, and I think that functions as a business, but I just wonder if that's something that as a city you could push out to say, like, does anybody have an interest in this? We'll support you in whatever that looks like, whether it's advocating, trying to help get grants for it, whatnot, because you have all these dogs in the pound, and my understanding is you're not advertising them, so the way that they're getting homed is by then again putting that back on Gregory Rescue and putting it on Cottonwood Kennels or the Kennel in Ideal. And that's, you know what I mean? So it's like, as a community, I think we do have a very big problem with all of the animals, and it just happens to be the location that we're in. But I think that's, again, a long-term, like you're looking like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, might be something to consider.
But ultimately, like with Lisa's problem, for example, she's got cats from an absentee neighbour who is having someone who is there to mow their lawn, putting out cat food, allowing shelter for these animals. These are not owned animals. This is exactly what I'm talking about, these fed cats. Now, if you go put a trap in Lisa's yard, I guarantee you're not going to catch a single freaking cat. And if you do catch a cat, it's not going to be one that's living next door. It'll be one that wandered in and didn't know the food was there yet. So you're not helping reduce Lisa's problem. So you have to put the onus back on that homeowner, and for example, she's not there, and you're like, lady, this dude needs to stop feeding your cats, otherwise it's $300 fine every month. And if she's like, well, I can't put traps out, great, okay, we'll trap them, but stop feeding them.
I think that's where,
I've seen the boxes on that porch
Yeah,
that just get shipped in.
chewy, yeah.
Chewy foods just get shipped in and dropped on the porch, and this person is.
And this is
That's
exactly
because the
what's
owner
happening.
died, left it in his will.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
No, she moved.
you have to put the liability back on the owner though. Like if they're, you know, legally, like I'm not gonna cover your legal fees if you get bit by a cat that you're trapping. So it's either you're gonna stop trapping,
So-
you're gonna stop feeding and
Yeah.
they'll just go away.
Right.
Or you're gonna be the one that traps them. If you need help, we could always have the officers help, but I feel like they should have to show like some sort of physical ailment to not be able to trap them. And that's why they're not having to.
Can we take a look at the proposed ordinance by section and just kind of discuss each of these sections?
Great.
Because they address some of the issues that you brought up, but they haven't detailed a solution. It's kind of outlined what the nuisance is, but there's no remedy as far as I can see. That's something that I think the council needs input Section 90.19, do you have a copy of that, what we have here? Lisa's got a copy? Okay.
I can make copies if anyone else needs it.
It addresses dogs as far as defined, but it doesn't address the cats. It spells out, it currently reads, in the event a dog is claimed as provided for in section 90.18, said person owning, controlling, or harboring the dog, it's proposed, shall pay a civil penalty of $50 per dog that was impounded, just a penalty.
Mr. Mayor, that got added because it wasn't
Right, I'm adding
there
the
when we
addition.
did the cat ordinance.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why that's there.
So this is proposed, $50 per dog that was impounded, plus the sum of $20 per day or a fraction thereof to the city for the cost of keeping said animals. So we are starting to fund, so to speak, and I doubt a lot of these owners or the feral cats will come looking for them, but it would be one remedy to fund a shelter. And then we move on to section 90.40, cats at large. Current ordinance reads, any person who shall keep, own, and harbor more than 3 adult cats within the corporate limits shall be guilty of creating a nuisance. It's being proposed and council has been advised that it is unconstitutional. So the proposed change is it is unlawful for any person to have any cat owned, controlled, or harbored by such person to run at large on the streets, alleys, or the private property of any person. Any person owning, controlling, or harboring any cat within the corporate limits shall keep that cat confined or otherwise controlled upon the property of said person so that that said cat cannot run at large. At large means off the premise of the owner and unrestrained from moving freely on the streets, alleys, private property of another. This is simply establishing the definition of a nuisance. Are we all in agreement that this is the actual definition that should be on the books? Okay, so section 90.40 is good, cats at large. The nuisance in 90.41, it's almost the same ordinance as 90.40 that was on the books. Proposed is any cat within the corporate limit that fails to remain on the property of the person that owns, controls, or harbors the cat, but instead runs at large on private property of other persons shall constitute a nuisance. That cat, once it leaves the property where it is being fed or homed or caregiven, becomes a nuisance to the neighbor, is what we're establishing.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but I believe, Mr. Tramp, correct me if I'm wrong, it was asked to add into that as well, not just private property, but on public property as well. So if it's in the
Yeah.
park or on the street or anything like that too.
So section 90.42 is where I think we're really starting to see the discrepancy between the method or the remedy. It's the abatement of the nuisance, and how do we do that? It's proposed right now that it shall be the duty of any officer, police officer, or animal control officer to enforce this subchapter. And if any cat is found running at large on private property in violation of 90.40 or 90.41, the police officer or animal control officer is hereby charged with the duty to pick up said cat, which is a violation of this subchapter, and hold said cat for a period of not to exceed 7 days. We're hearing we should limit this to 2 to 3 days and make a move right there. I see everybody in agreement on that, reducing this to 2 to 3 days, and that is the recommendation to council from the public. Section B says if said cat is not claimed by the person owning, controlling, or harboring said cat within the 2 to 3 day period, said police officer or animal control officer shall transfer the cat to a shelter or to a rural setting where the property owner agrees to the placement. This is a big discrepancy, right? At this point, this is where you're recommending the tipping, the vaccination, and the spay and neuter.
Yep.
And
I would
that's-
say and return back, I mean, because you're just gonna get them back if you try to relocate them somewhere.
Okay.
In that clause, is it feasible to add that if it's something that can be homed, we can try to home it? Like, try is the word, like, it's no longer.
Can we
it's no
make that a
longer
city
person's,
responsibility,
no one
though?
can claim it,
I don't think we can.
right? So then that kind of addresses the Sioux Falls things, if that's
So
something that we.
this is a question that's being posed. At that point, after 2 to 3 days, we've went through the spay and neuter and the TNR program. That cat doesn't have an owner. Nobody has claimed it. It does become property of the city of Winter. And
We don't know.
I understand that, and we can try to relocate it as the owners of
See, and that's
the
where
cat.
caregiver comes in, that all of the national and international major animal associations say, because I'm not talking about the ones that can be found homes. I'm talking, because that's what needs to happen. I'm talking about the ones that cannot be rehomed.
But it sounds like that's
That's
what's
returning
creating the
to-
issue.
yep.
Okay,
That's returning to the
So if you
problem
just
of the
return them
neighboring
to the property,
properties.
So like, if we just keep it in bullets, if you guys now are the said owner and you just return the ones that have now been clipped back to the streets, if you find one that is friendly, which the animal clinic and I can usually tell, then we could look at trying to find fosters locally. And I've been fairly successful at that. Now, that's not a guarantee, but I think then it's your property, so if we can work together to then, you know what I mean?
I understand that. One of my concerns when I look at the ordinances 90.4 and 90.41, as now the property owner of said animal, we are contributing to the nuisance by returning it. That's where the council is really struggling, because we become part of the nuisance in the city at that point.
We are controlling.
Because we do have the ownership and the controlling, and I don't have the answer, but by definition, we are part of the nuisance problem. If we return them in your TNR program, the return is the R. That's what I struggle with, Felicia, is we become part of that problem. Where if we relocate to a different location, to farms, I've heard a lot of testimony on that. But to return them within the corporate limits, we are contributing to breaking our own laws, and we can't do that legally. So that's a solution that's got to be remedied in any discussion.
The nuisance clause,
Pardon me?
do you legally need the nuisance clause?
Yes, you have to
In order
define.
require an abatement, we have to have the nuisance clause.
So I'm wondering,
I think we have to provide some relief for, we do have property owners in the city of Winter, like Lisa's situation, where that's just, you know, she shouldn't have to deal with that, so I'm just not saying you guys' program isn't, I think your program is a wonderful program, I think it would be long-term, it's a really good solution, but I do think we have to address, because it's just gotten crazy here in the last year, where we get phone call after phone call after phone call, and the sad part is, a lot of the phone calls that we get aren't live animals anymore.
Yeah.
So people are poisoning them, they're, you know, they're taking care of it on their own
well, and
hands.
you only have to look, that's why, like I said, this cat hoarding, feeding is a mental illness, because in front of these homes, there will be dead cats in the road. They have a high rate of disease, as in distemper, that causes them to die and suffer. It's not, these people truly believe they're making a difference, but they are not, they are actually exacerbating the problem, but you cannot get that.
But I think you have to remember that this is now you're talking about wild.
Health and safety.
It's really no different than if if I'm trying to grow a garden and all of a sudden I've got a bunny outbreak, I'm gonna take care of the bunnies. People in winter are gonna take care of the cats. I mean, we see it all the time on the outskirts of town, and so if we could do the trapping and relocate a bunch of animals, and relieve some of the issues that we have, like in Lisa's neighborhood. I know we have a couple homeowners over on the south side of town that are really begging for some kind of help to get rid of some cats. If we could go and take care of those bigger problems and then start implementing this program, would be, beneficial.
But I think, like, for example, if you find the owner of the house, for example, that Lisa lives now, because she doesn't live there, right? So she's not
Right.
going to trap anything, right? So if you basically find her for every day she puts food out, like literally, it's $300 a day sweet cheeks for every day you put food out, she's going to stop. And if she stops, we can trap those cats, and even if there will be a proportion of them we can rehome to homes. There will be a proportion of them that maybe can go to ranches far enough away. But the ones that, even if we re-released them, they're not going to stay there. They're not going to stay there. They will not congregate there. And the other thing is like, like we say, oh, we'll go set a trap. We don't need that homeowner on our side to. If you go set a trap, cats don't eat where they poop. So you're not going to catch cats.
In my yard.
Lisa's yard.
Theoretically, in my yard.
They're not going to go, like, you put a trap on Lisa's place because she's like, yeah, trap these cats, I don't want them here.
So we
They're
should
not
all
gonna-
put food out.
If we
If
all
everybody
did
in
it,
town
yeah.
put food out, we'd have no place for the cats to do it.
Harbor those cats.
They're not gonna stay there,
But
but
I have a question on finding somebody that we think is feeding cats.
The nuisance.
Aren't we gonna have a hell of a time proving that those cats don't belong to that person?
If this ordinance passes, though, it becomes
doesn't
a
matter.
nuisance whether
It
they
doesn't matter.
own them or not, because those
Right,
cats are
because they're
running free.
harboring them.
And
off
also,
the
if
they're
property.
allowing
you
them
go
to
talk
run.
to these people, the second you put any pressure on them, they go, well, they're not my cats, I just feed them. The second you put pressure on them, they'll like flip.
It kind of follows the same thing as animal cruelty and neglect. Like when I walked up to these people, the cats looked terrible and they're like hoarding them, right? They're like, oh, that's not mine. When you're like, that cat needs looked at, that's really bad. They're like, oh, it's not mine. So as soon as they now become financially responsible for something, that's when you typically find that they're like, no, never mind, that's not mine. I am wondering, and this is something they would have to talk about, and I just want to bring up everything that we can possibly talk about during this meeting.
Sure.
Food for thought. But if it's something where, an officer catches a cat and then takes it to the animal clinic for a spay and neuter, is it then something that they can hold on to for, you know what I mean? Because it's just like a volunteer program. I don't know if that still is inflicted in the nuisance is still your property, or if it's then, if they're holding it, does that change anything?
It's either the city of Winter's property or the animal clinics at that point, once the property is turned over. I was looking at section 90.41, and I want to interject here real quick. In that section is where we are defining the nuisance, and the penalty is proposed to be $300 a day if you are maintaining a nuisance, is the proposal. So
Okay,
that
I
needs to
have
be
that
spelled out
one.
there.
But, yeah.
I have something to add to that then,
Okay.
on the nuisance part and the $300 fine. Where I live, we have 30 dogs running around. They're the ones that use my yard.
Sure. And this ordinance is defined not simply, it's kind of misleading. 90.19 deals with dogs. And this ordinance, when we put this out for first reading, will be equally for cats and dogs. This will be the same. Each will be held equally.
Got bunnies, got chickens, that's my part of this.
Fowl is not allowed, and this is just from the ordinance standpoint, you're not allowed to have free roaming fowl anyway. That's a separate ordinance all in itself. We don't have anything on bunnies,
Yeah.
but I also have it.
Chickens
bunny
are
problem
addressed
to
in our
address.
ordinance.
Yes.
In a different ordinance.
And the
Yeah.
nuisance becomes when somebody calls in and says it's becoming a nuisance. The city sees a dog in somebody's yard, not gonna
Right,
go
I'm not gonna
grab
microchip
it
it,
and
yeah.
take it and see if it's owned by somebody. If it, when the
goes
nuisance,
back
to
to the
me,
chip
the
reader.
nuisance becomes when you've turned it in.
Yeah, I think you can keep all of, I think you can keep all of that. I think if the officer actually does go over to the yard, right, and puts out a trap and does catch something, and it then becomes the city's, I guess my advising wouldn't be to then go relocate it somewhere far away. So you're gonna have to figure that out. I mean, you can certainly do that. I think you're just gonna come back to the same problem, so that's not solving anything. But it does fix, you're then at least showing in action. The amount of those that you will actually catch is probably gonna be fairly low. So I doubt that that's gonna make a huge impact on anything. So that's where, I'm gonna use your terms, but adding teeth to your policy to actually address the issue and call the community to then be involved, I think is helpful. So the nuisance clause, I don't know how you get around that in terms of then releasing it back.
Do you know those cities that you mentioned, Dr. Laura, Sturgis, Rapid City, are the cities the one who are honestly controlling it? Because then I'm also, from the liability standpoint on the insurance, if we now own these animals and different things like that, how is that going to affect our insurance and different things like that? So I didn't know if it was the actual municipality or just a group that they're supporting.
Yeah, no, so the municipality, it does become theirs, and like I said, they're spayed, neutered and released, they're not fed by the city, they're not, so, I understand, I feel like maybe that's the way they go around it, because the city's not putting out food, water and shelter for these animals. They're spaying and neutering them so they can't breed, making them identifiable from a distance and re-releasing them. So they're not harboring them or encouraging them to stay in that area. Now, you can't release them in another area. There's Sioux Falls has struggled with that, so you can't just go, you have to have the person say, yeah, I want that cat. So it has to be rehomed rather than re-released. You can't take one from 7th Street and put it on, Lamb Row or something, because then you're moving that problem to that area. So, but I think that's the way the cities are getting around it is because they're not feeding them, they're not providing them shelter or resources. They're literally just making it so they can't breed, identifiable as such, and releasing them back to the area in which they came.
And within 3 months, you see,
So they're not gonna be fed the 2 days that they're in the cage? at the
Quick
farm?
question.
absolutely, at that point, they would be our responsibility.
So do you
Yes.
guys have to, is it possible for the cats, you take them, is it possible to just take the cat from the property straight to the animal clinic to be fixed? And then it's no longer, and then, we wait until the sedation has worn off and we're just releasing it fairly quickly? Then then it's nobody's property? Is that possible?
I
But
think,
then what if that is an owned cat?
I think the 2 to 3 day period establishes a period for somebody that does own it to come claim the cat. At the end of whatever we decide, Felicia, whether it's 48 or 72 hours, once that animal goes unclaimed, it would become the city of Winters to,
So I wonder if it's something that we could then claim it and then just release it,
yeah. But that's establishing a nuisance.
Right.
I think if we reach out to these cities, and actually a couple of these cities have the same liability insurance that we do, and so we have the ability to get that information from these other cities on how they get around that without causing legal issues and all of that too, so.
We sure can't be the only town in South Dakota that has cat problems.
No, by the look of these pamphlets,
No,
it's
I just read
other
one
cities
city
also.
calls
I mean,
cats,
Indianapolis I saw in here.
2,000 cats?
Three.
And
Three.
that's what, when you're saying, oh, we'll just rehome
That's
these
not so
branches.
many in a town
I
of
don't think
300.
you understand the potential of the amount of cats we're talking about. We're not talking about 20 to 30 cats, we're talking about thousands of cats in the city of Winter.
Currently.
Thousands.
You think there's that many?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's curious to me.
Yeah. So-
Just in our trailer court, in one day, we
They
took
caught
18.
Yeah.
We took 18 down in the trailer court to the animal clinic. They found homes for 4 or 5, but the rest of them were so wild that, and one of them has been there, good Lord, I don't know how many years, but years. So something like that, you
Yeah, I mean, we've had multiple situations where we went over a house on First Street and was like, hey, these cats look terrible, and just talked to the lady. I actually wrote something up real fast, like, you're not gonna get me legally in trouble from taking these, because you're agreeing to give them to me. But I took 12 in a day, and I told Laura, like, let's set an appointment for 1 to 2. And I was like, hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm coming at you with 12 cats. You got room for them right now? So I mean, they're a lot. Like, when the people are feeding them, it's like 20 to 30 in one area. And then you multiply that to lots of different hotspots internally. I would say we probably have thousands on the street.
Oh, yeah, even with what we picked up that day, I can tell from, them not being, what's it called, chipped. I could bet that there's probably another 20 cats.
40.
40. But we have, where we are, we're outside of town enough that when we lived on Dump Road in the Blue House, we had cats that were fishers that would come, Lee and Diane Fisher, because it had a collar. I mean, like she said, they have a radius. So where we are, we're getting ones from the country coming in. So like you said, if you're gonna release them to the country, they're gonna end up that.
So just to go back to what you were saying, like, when it then becomes your property, what is the solution? Because then if you're taking them and they're your property and you're putting them back on farms, we did talk about how that, you might get into some cruelty and neglect situations there. So it's like, we have to find a good way of maybe reaching out to those cities and finding out.
I think that's what we'll
And I
have
can
to
give
do.
you my contacts information. I also did connect with the Sioux Falls one, so I know a couple of the folks there that are trying to run that program. They would be more than happy to help. I think the Alley Cats also, I think I can probably find out the contact for that person. And they're obviously a nationwide program, but, we can work together, try to get you some of that information if that helps establish how they're getting around the use.
Please hold that door so it doesn't slam.
Yeah. I think there's no point necessarily creating something if there's a city that this is already working for. And obviously, we do have to watch on the liability front too, for if they are truly our property, what kind of liability is that putting on?
At what point, I'm going to ask the question that has, this has not been brought up except for very vaguely. At what point do you euthanize? Shelters will they'll clean up the animals. I'll speak of dog shelters. I've went to a shelter looking for a dog. They will feed the dog for 7 to 10 days, vaccinate. They'll try to get it a home. But at what point does that become part of the equation? I mean,
So I think when it comes to-
especially if, Felicia, they become the city of Winter's property, how long do we hold on to them before there's just no more remedy?
Sounds like
And
you guys are doing, the proposal right now is the 7 days, right?
which you've proposed to go to 2 to 3.
Right, which I
But-
agree with. So,
okay.
But that's what I'm saying is like, are you then, like, is your proposal at that point to then euthanize them?
No, it's not. I'm just asking the
Right.
question
And so I just
of,
want to clarify. So then when it comes to like our side of things and how we've done it, when we euthanize, it's because the animal, we've tried. So I get donations, they are taken straight to the animal clinic. They just have a pool that they pull from to like basically bill West River. Because West River's giving a certain amount and then we have to pay West River the X number amount. So when we're getting cats that need I think we even amputated a leg at one point. Like I covered that cost with the funds that I, was pulling in. So that's been, like, we're trying, we're doing what we can, what's best for the animal, and I don't know how you establish, like, where that line ends, and I don't know if we need to establish that, I don't know if that's something that,
So medically, we have euthanized cats in the trap neuter release program because they've been too ill to be spayed and neutered. They're not going to survive. They're chronic pneumonias, stuff like that. We have. It's not been very many, but we have had to do it. Now, as far as it being a liability deal, as in like, you've got these cats, you don't want to re-release them to the street, so then do we just put them down? We can't find homes for them because they're healthy and everything, but we can't find somewhere for them to go.
that does happen
It
in
does.
dog shelters.
It
I've
does,
seen
and
that.
I would say that you legally will be able to find a way to do that. What I will also say is that you will see a spike in cat numbers because these animal feeder hoarders will come at you by having more cats.
And there's also the vacuum effect. So let
The
me
what
just-
effect, please?
It's called vacuum effect. When you take a cat out of the area that was previously in, it opens up a spot for more cats to then come in, because cats are territorial, and you can look that up on Alley Cat, I think it's on the first page, but
Yeah.
I can certainly send that to you. Basically, how they describe that is like, you take the cat from the said area that it was holding its place in society, essentially, then all of a sudden there's an opening there, which then, other cats are coming in to fill, so you end up actually congregating more than what the original numbers were. So just take that into
So
consideration.
these cats are like a gang.
Yes, literally.
Yeah. So, and I have to leave real quick here, but, so I don't read in this ordinance anywhere, any restrictions of citizens feeding, whatever word you want to use, stray cats.
Fair, yeah.
So it would seem to me that that's what we ought to maybe consider right now, a huge fine. But my question would be, how are we going to prove it that Brad Schramm was feeding these cats?
You can see
I
it.
think you can't, well, you can't.
What's that?
If you can see it, I think you can issue the fine. I think that's where making it so that if they're hoarding cats on their property, they're fixing them will be a lot easier, because you're seeing pictures like there's a bunch of cats on your yard, set a trap. You know what I mean? Whereas if you could find people for feeding them if you can visibly see that. But if you can't, and they're just really tricky at hiding the food, like other people in this room, and I'm not pointing at you, but like people are hiding food and you can't physically see it, then how are you gonna fix the problem?
Yeah, because I was feeding my one cat.
Right.
It's
So-
not, how can I be responsible for 17 stray cats
Exactly.
coming in and eating my cat's food? So I don't know that we can possibly come up with a solution to this.
I don't think you can, I think you could find them if you can see them feeding them. That can be another tier of that.
We have one example where I know we could find somebody that was given in testimony right earlier. Dr. Kobe?
I think if who's ever enforcing the ordinance is in contact with Felicia, and I think some of the officers as well, they will know the households that are actively trying to control their population. So, yes, they may have a lot of cats at their house, but they are in the TNR. I mean, they are trying to help the problem. And this is gonna sound cold, but if that household is feeding cats that are in the TNR and they've been spayed or neutered, time will tell, and that population will dwindle because of everything we've been talking about. They'll start to scatter, and you won't draw in outside cats because there's no viable females, so that.
No sex, yeah.
That
controls everything.
That male isn't going to.
He'll
So
move.
my point is, if who's ever enforcing the ordinance is in contact with Felicia, they're gonna know the houses that are feeding the cats and are doing nothing about it. So you would have an idea of, okay, that house needs fine. They are not doing anything. They've been approached, they don't want anything to do with the TNR. So those are it's not gonna be all the hot spots in town. There's gonna be a couple that, for whatever reason, these are my cats, I own them. There's nothing in the city that says I can't own more than 3 cats, which I think, if Mr. Jensen was here, I just did a quick lookup. Sioux Falls only requires 4 cats, 4 pets completely, dogs and cats total. So there is documentation out there where I think we could probably put teeth in our ordinance that you can't have
I think you'll
ownership.
find every
Because
city
I think
has
you're gonna
that.
run in, you were talking about whose property they are. Well, you're gonna run into trouble that, you catch cats and people are gonna say, well, that's my property, and you can't tell me how many cats I own. Well, I think if we just put our heads down and gonna put up with some guff, I think we could probably put teeth to that there's other cities out there that you can only have 2 cats. So I think we could do that.
And I think at one time, Winter did have an ordinance saying you could only own 5 pets. It wasn't, no, I mean way back, when I first moved here, at that time, I mean, I could be wrong, but do remember that Winter had that, where it's 5 total.
I believe it was 7.
Was it 7?
Yeah,
You
if you,
remember the?
I remember reading an
But we
ordinance.
specifically had 3 in the old ordinance that we're trying to change.
Right, at one time it
3
said you could
cats.
have up to 7 within your home.
That's what I think,
Right.
it's
So,
like you
so how
can't
long does
lean
it
on
take,
that.
once, if you trap them, you neuter them, you put them back to where they were before they start scattering?
That's
3
what
months.
I was gonna say.
It's
We
pretty
did-
fast. It
yeah.
depends on male or female. The quicker you remove the females, the quicker it's gonna happen. So if you trap, Lane Lake trapping isn't an exact science, you get what goes in the trap. If you're gonna mainly
Fix it
trap
all.
the males, it's gonna take longer because that's gonna attract other males, right? If you get rid of the females, it happens fast, like within 3 months. So the quicker you get below critical mass, so like below 50% of that colony area, 50% of those females in that colony are going to be spayed, you're going to see a reduction. And the first 90 cats we spayed at the animal clinic when we started this program were pregnant.
Yes.
90, first 90. Every single one of them had at least 3 kittens in it.
Yeah, because you did that
So
for my house.
they were
too.
literally at least 3 kittens that never came into fruition.
270 other.
So, and that was like, at
The
least
reason,
there
the
was
reason I
something
ask
many.
is, because the public, the main, our complaint is obviously feces in other yards.
Yep.
So if neutering them and releasing them was like a 5-7 year plan, that's
No,
not,
it's
not.
Lisa's
No,
not
ours-
gonna
months.
accept that. Say,
No,
oh,
it
sorry,
happens
about your
much
luck,
quicker
7
than that.
years, you should see a decline.
But
That-
you've got to get the homeowner to be part of it. And
Yeah.
if they're not, like this particular homeowner doesn't even live there, so they're not going to participate, are they? They're not there. It comes to, you've got to, if you can't start trapping the cats for us to do this, you have to stop feeding the cats so we can trap the cats.
And then if they don't stop feeding them in that case, then that
Yeah,
becomes the
exactly. So I
fine.
think you've got to give them the opportunity to buy into it and try, because otherwise, literally, these people are going to go get more cats. I'm not even kidding you. They will go out of town and get more cats and bring them in, and you're just going to never get ahead of it. They have to be part of the buy-in. They either have to be trapping them themselves and getting them to us, or they have to be fined if they feed them and they won't trap.
So who of our staff would be responsible for reaching out to other towns and getting their cat ordinances? Or their pet ordinances, whatever you want to call them?
That falls on the city attorney.
I think we need to include the code enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, we need to direct somebody
did
to
you
get
call
us
it
that
yesterday?
information.
Yeah, we get.
I heard there were a couple of terms that you threw out. Justin was sharing.
But
Okay,
Austin, they trapped those at my house May. I think it was May. I am down to 7 cats.
From how many?
From, I was feeding 20, and it's down to 7 from May till before the storm, before it got bad. My neighbor, on the other hand, he's one of them that they're speaking of. He goes
So
on
at one point or
Facebook,
another, we
yeah.
had the animal clinic had volunteered a couple of their employees to go out and trap. They trapped on her property as they were given permission to. They ended up trapping however many, I think you said 18, took them to the clinic, got them all fixed, returned most of them, homed a couple. It sounds like she went from 18-ish to 7. So, I mean, I think that gives you a good indication, like how quickly, in terms of time
It
frame, I
does.
will say, like, in the first month, you'll probably see some change. In the first 3 months, a little bit more. In the next 6 months, I would say you will see a drastic time. You do want to do it now, though. While the population has now just taken a hit with the freezing temperatures that we've had, if we can get this going soon, you'll have better luck, because spring's coming, and then they're gonna
Stop breeding.
start breeding fast.
so just from a budgeting, future budgeting standpoint, if we have a population of 1,000 cats and it's 500 females, half and half, male to female ratio, 1-to-1, those 500 female cats, what is our cost to spay, neuter, tip them? And so we have an idea of what we can contribute possibly back to this program,
So right
along
now-
with what we're receiving from,
We charge the coalition $100 to spay a cat.
okay?
And 75, I think, to neuter a cat. They do not cover rabies vaccination. Felicia's donations have been covered the rabies vaccination, which is about $40-something.
The rabies and the rabies and the fixing, the fixing is $10 for me that I raise, and then the rabies is $7. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
So it's 17 usually per cat for me. to
yeah.
pay.
So it's basically 117 for a spay, and with rabies, and then for a neuter, you're looking at, what's that, 90?
Yeah, I just did.
So
some quick
$200 a
math.
cat total.
$150
$210.
a
If you
cat.
went at this in 1 year trying to fix 1,000 cats, you'd be around 90,000.
90,000?
90,000, because I assumed that we're still doing donations as well, like that we're trying to cover 17, but if you covered that as well, 17 times 1,000 plus 90, you're around 100,000, 110,000 to be safe. Like, I would not imagine that you're covering 100 or 1,000 cats in a year, though. Like, it's gonna take a pronged approach, but.
I don't know, we can get aggressive.
You're hiring another employee, I
Welcome aboard.
It does specify that the police officers are the ones that pick them up.
Because
I just buy the
think you would
trips.
struggle to trap that. You just would. You're not going to, especially with the other issues that go on in this town as far as feeding, harboring, and stuff like that. You would struggle to trap 1,000 cats. You're probably going to trap around, I think your max would be probably 300-ish a year, is what you could trap. Now, what's on the street is not what you can trap, because you're not going to trap. You're going to literally trap maybe 10 to 20%.
I'd say like
that's it.
even aiming at, 300 to 500 on like a high side per year, depending on how impactful the officers can be at like issuing the fines, which I know they would do well. If you could, kind of send out the hot spots, and then obviously, if you're amplifying this to the community, like, hey, if you see all these cats gathering, make a call into the officers, then it's not all on the city to be like, oh, I need to make this call. But just like dogs as being a nuisance, like people are regularly calling, at least that's, then you can act on the call that's been made.
Okay.
I have to go to work, but thank you.
Yeah,
for
we
the
do need to
information.
conclude because of
Glad we got together.
blood drive.
We really appreciate your time and just listening to all of this, obviously.
I don't think we'll put a first reading on this is gonna be tabled, and we may actually,
It'll be 3 weeks before this committee meets again,
okay.
just FYI.
And of course, at all times, anybody, feel free to
Reach out to us.
any questions or whatever. I mean,